Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Blissful Literati. Today, we are going to discuss one of the most interesting fairy tales from Japan titled The Ashes That Made Trees Bloom as a part of our CBSE syllabus of Class 7 from the literature textbook Honeycomb. But before we begin, let's take a brief glance at the author and try to get acquainted with him and his work. William Elliott Griffiths was born in 1843 Philadelphia and died in 1928 Florida. He served as a minister, an author, and even a professor. His notable works include Belgian fairy tales, Swiss fairy tales, Welsh fairy tales, Korean fairy tales, and Japanese fairy tales. He is basically a collector, a compiler of fairy tales, and he even rewrote them, keeping a modern reader in mind. Let us now talk about the themes of this particular story that we are about to read. The Ashes That Made Trees Bloom has for its theme honesty and triumph of hard work. It also considers loyalty, love, and compassion for its theme. Finally, it talks about the triumph of good over evil. But before we start now the story, jump right into it. Let's stop here for a moment and think why we should read it. Why should we bother ourselves with this particular story? You see, sometimes we feel all the hard work that we do, they are not really appreciated. The number of kills in PUBG doesn't bring a smile on mom's face. The late night studies are not magically transformed into equally great marks. So, all the effort, whether it is one night long duration study or long time strategy for some online game, when these things they don't work in favor of us, in our favor, we think, where is God in all this? But trust me, nothing is lost. Love, loyalty, compassion, God sees them all and we are justly rewarded, even if not immediately. Similarly, hatred, selfishness, they do us no good, and no matter whatever is the momentary gain, in the long run, it all comes to nothing. So, no matter how hard the journey seems, how unappreciated all the efforts look, this story reminds us that if the intention is correct, if our purpose is dedicated towards something good, then good shall we reap. This story, therefore, gives us hope in its limited scope to continue to persevere. Let us now talk about the characters in this story, and then we shall talk about the conflict, the basic conflict, which is the main part which makes a story really interesting. But first of all, the characters. As the tradition with fairy tales, we have a good old man, the good element. So, good old man and good old woman, his wife, and Muko, their pet dog. So, one good family. And pitted against this good family is the evil force, the wicked old man and the selfish old woman. And finally, we have daimyo, a wealthy landowner and his procession. You see, daimyos are the landowners of any country, the zamindars, if we may, but in Japan. So these are the characters, and now let us come to the conflict in this story. You see, in literature, conflict signifies the struggle between two opposing forces. Conflict is that element which makes a story really interesting. Think of the conflict between Iron Man and Ultron in the Age of Ultron. That's a conflict that operated on both levels, external in the heroic fight and internal in Iron Man's mind. The conflict in this story is the eternal struggle between good and evil. The two old men reminds us of Ali Baba and his selfish brother. The spirit of the dog provides a sense of divine intervention and a device to bring justice to the conflict and thereby resolve it. Because good and evil is embodied by the two farmers and the conflict between them, the conflict in this story is external in nature. Let us now talk about the summary. But this is a long story and we are not going to read it line by line. So what we are going to do is to go into the summary with great detail, with great depth, and we will analyze the summary in two halves basically. We will take the dog as a marker. So we will learn what happened when the dog was alive, and we will also learn what happened when the dog was dead. So let's begin at the beginning. That is, when the dog was alive and the family of the good old couple was whole, complete. So long time ago, a long time back, there lived an honest, hard-working old couple. They lived happily together and they were blessed in everything in their life. They lived an honest life. But the only problem in their life, only issue in their life was that they had no children. But again, they had learned to live with that fact that they didn't have any children. What they had instead, they had a pet dog. The name of the dog was Muko. And they showered the dog with all the love in the world. They took care of him, fed him, and kept him as their own son. The dog rewarded them by finding a pile of gold for them. You see, dogs, they connect with human beings like no other animals. So he could understand the love, the genuine, heartfelt love that this old couple had for him. And this was a miracle that one day this dog came running to the old man and took him to a spot where, after digging for a few moments, he discovered a good big pile of gold. But their happiness became the cause of envy of this jealous and selfish old couple. And when they learned how the dog has acted as a gold detector, they tried to use the dog to find riches for themselves. But the dog could sense the negative energy that surrounded them, that enveloped them. So he was afraid, he was scared, and he didn't help them. In fact, he led him to the point in their garden where, after digging, they found a dead kitten. You can understand the frustration, the anger that this jealous couple felt. And in the jealous, blind rage, they beat the dog to death. And there comes a change in the story. So we come to the point when the dog was dead. What happened? Let's learn about all that. The farmer, the good old poor farmer, when he came to know about the death of his dog, he came there. He carried the body away to bury him and to mourn his death. But what happened? This man, he laid a cup of water and a tray of food on the grave. He wept. He made the ground moist with his tears and he wept himself to sleep. The dog came to him in his dream and rewarded him for a lifetime of love and compassion. The dog came in his dream and told him, instructed him to cut down the pine tree over his grave, the pine tree which got its nourishment from the same soil which was made moist by the tears of this poor old farmer, the tears of love that he showered for his dead companion, his dead son. The dog, he took care of the dog as his own son. The dog instructed him to cut down the tree and make from it a mortar and a mill. The old man then chopped down the tree. What happened next? Next came New Year, a good time, a holy time. In the new year, this man, he wished to make some rice pastry. When the rice was all boiled, the old woman put it into the mortar. The old man lifted his hammer to pound the muss into dough, and the blows, they fell heavy and fast, till the pastry was all ready for baking. But suddenly happened another miracle. The whole mass was turned into a heap of gold coins. And when the old woman took the hand mill and started to fill it with beans and began to grind, the output was again in gold and it came out like rains. But again, their happiness was not tolerated by the old couple which was jealous and selfish. They tried to take the mill and the mortar away, but in their jealous hand, in their selfish need, they stopped working. And this old couple, they broke it in their frustration and used the wood as fire stick. What happened? The dog again came to the dream of this poor farmer and told him everything that has happened. He told him all about the jealousy of his neighbor and how they have burned the wood as firewood. He instructed the old man to go and collect the ashes, and this time he said to sprinkle them on the withered trees so that the trees will again bloom into life. And the old man followed his words. He took the ashes and he performed a test, and he saw how the pink blooms were covering the trees which were dead and withered in the winter. Next came the daimyo. The final element was now introduced in the story. What happened? This old man learned the daimyo, the zamindar, was coming. And he did what? He went ahead and climbed a tree just on the track from where the daimyo and his procession will pass. So, what he took with him? He took with him his basket of those miracle ashes. When the daimyo's palanquin drew near, the old man, taking a pinch of ashes from his basket, he scattered it over the withered tree on which he was. In a moment, it burst into blossom, and the flower petals they dropped, they showered on the daimyo. He was really happy, pleased, and he rewarded this old couple. The jealous couple wanted to get even more rewards. So again, this envious, jealous, selfish old man, he took his own basket of ashes and climbed another tree. But this time, again, he didn't learn his lesson. He didn't realize that the dog didn't help him when he was alive. The dog didn't help him with the mill and the mortar when he was dead. Then why did he even hope that this will work? But as you see, greed and jealousy, they understand nothing. They learn no lesson. So he went up on the tree and he took a pinch of the ashes and dropped it on the tree, scattered it in the wind. But again, as expected, it didn't work with his jealous hands. The fine ashes and the dust they went into the nose of the daimyo and his procession. The daimyo, his wife, they were all sneezing and everything was in chaos. The old jealous man was discovered, and by the order of the king, that is the daimyo, the wealthy landowner, he was beaten terribly and left to die in the mud, just as many moons back he had left the dog, the poor old helpless dog, in the mud to die. However, the good old couple, they continued to live happily ever after. So the dog basically, even after his death, he punished the selfish couple for their greed and wickedness. So basically, this is the summary of the story. Let us now analyze the elements part by part. First of all, we have the poor old couple. The poor old couple, they were genuinely good in nature. They lived alone and they had no children, but they never pined for it. They didn't consider them as unlucky. Instead, whatever love they had, they showered all of it on their pet dog Muko. And Muko, that is the dog, also lived happily with them ever after. The old man was of a selfless nature and had nothing but love for all the creation of God. He will hurt nobody. He treated his dog as a human being and he was even merciful and took care of the insects and birds and all the natural elements all around. When the dog died, the old couple they loved the dog so much that they mourned the death of their own son. The dog was not just a dog. They showered all their love on him, just like their own son, and they mourned for him. Even when dealt in insult and hatred, they never gave hatred a place in their heart. Just imagine their envious, jealous neighbor tormented them for so many evils. They took the dog away, they took the mortar and the meal away. They even blamed them for stealing the ashes and everything. Even then, they kept their quiet. They never fought back, they never argued back. So they never basically gave hatred a place in their heart. Their inherent goodness and hard work were finally rewarded when the jealous old couple was punished by the spirit of the dog and daimyo as an element of God. Let us now talk about the selfish couple. Like in any good fairy tale which embodies the struggle between the good and the evil, we have the good in the good old couple, and pitted against all their goodness and kindness, we have the selfish couple. The selfish couple had neither love nor compassion for God's creation. You see, they were very selfish. They loved only themselves and money. They didn't care for anything. They lived aloof, alone. They were jealous of the neighbor, the poor old man and his wife. They couldn't understand how these people can live so happily. They didn't even have their own children, own son, daughter, nothing. So, how could they be so happy? They couldn't understand that. They couldn't understand the love, compassion that they kept in their heart. Their heart, the selfish couple's heart, was turned into stone because of their selfishness. Their cruelty reached its peak when, in a jealous rage, they killed that helpless dog. Just as the hardworking couple is associated with creation, the farming, the creation of the mill, the mortar, the watering of the ground, everything, the selfish couple is associated with destruction. They destroy, they kill the dog, they break the mortar and mill into pieces and burn them as firewood. And they even destroy the peace of the daimyo when they scatter the ashes on the tree. The ashes they don't work and it come into the nose as dust particles and makes them sneeze. So basically, they are the agent of destruction, and at the end of the story, they themselves are destroyed. Finally, they get the punishment they deserve for their envy and cruelty in the hands of the daimyo and his servants. Finally, we have the Jux Machina, the dog, God's agent basically. You see, the dog represents those in God's creation who cannot speak for themselves and are helpless when faced with human cruelty. Dogs are mute, dumb creatures, and there are so many other mute, dumb creatures, not only in the animal world but even in the human world. The poor people whom nobody supports, nobody speaks for them, but even they are the creation of God. God works for them, God thinks for them. So they are not really helpless. God is with them. If they are enterprising, if they want to really do something, then God is with them to help them throughout their life. Being loved by the old couple as their own son, the dog helps them find a pile of gold to ease their old age. So it is as if the dog is not just any dog. He can not only feel, but he can actually work, serve, take care of the old couple as their own son. He was taken as their own son and he himself behaved as their own son. The old couple took care of him and he provided the old couple with the gold so that they can live happily in their old age. So basically, the dog is like God's miracle, sent for those who follow the path of godliness through selfless love and compassion, which the poor old man, the good old man and his wife followed with their heart full of love and compassion and loyalty towards everything in God's creation, everything and everyone. This is even more apparent when the dog, even after his death, takes care of the good old couple and punishes the selfish couple. Especially, we can even say that after death, the dog truly becomes a fairy, a guardian angel. He actually provides them with a miraculous, magical mill and mortar, and then he even transforms normal firewood ashes into something miraculous which makes wider trees bloom. So he is the guardian angel sent by God to take care of his creation, the good old couple. So here we discussed the basic elements of the story. Now let us talk about the miracles. You see, there are at least three miracles in total in the story. And what are they? Let's take a good look. The first miracle. Remember when the dog was alive? The first miracle takes place when the dog was alive. The dog one day came to the old farmer and dragged him to a particular spot in the garden. The farmer thought maybe the dog had found some bones. Why? Because he started scratching the ground. The farmer thought perhaps there is some bone or fish buried underneath which the dog wants to get. And compassionate person that he was, he tried to help him. He helped the dog by striking his hoe on the ground. And as he did that, as he dug the ground, he discovered a pile of gold there. So this is the first miracle because you see, a dog, again I repeat, is not a gold detector. So the dog must have been sent by God, and the gold must have been placed by God there for the farmer. For the second miracle, we have the time after the death of the dog. The dog, after his death, came to the old man in his dreams. In his dream, the dog advised him to cut down the pine tree on his grave and make a mortar and a mill from its wood. You see, this is the same pine tree which was nourished by the tears of love and pain of the farmer. He wept on the grave of the dog when he died. And the farmer, he actually followed the instructions which he received in his dream. When he put rice in the mortar and pounded it to a dough, it turned into gold. Similarly, when the old woman started to grind beans in the hand mill, gold began to drop like rains. So, this was the second miracle. And finally, we have the third miracle. You see, the jealous old couple, when they came to know about the mill and the mortar, they borrowed it. They thought they will reap its benefit, but in their jealous hand, they stopped working. So, again, the jealous rage, the farmer, the selfish farmer and his wife, they burnt it, they destroyed it. And the spirit of the dog came in the dreams and told the poor farmer how the jealous couple had burned the mortar and the mill. But he didn't stop there. The farmer was sad. Maybe he was even weeping in his dreams because those mortar and the mill were the last memento of the dog. But the dog, the spirit, advised the farmer to collect the ashes of the mortar and the mill. Because of their goodness, kindness, and the blessing of God, those ashes were now miracle. They had turned into something magical. When sprinkled by his hand, a hand of love, care, the ashes would make withered trees bloom immediately. Creation. You see, goodness, kindness, they create. God's blessing was there, definitely, but it is the miracle of the goodness and kindness that lives in the heart of the good old farmer. By showing this miracle in front of the daimyo, the old man got rewarded and lived the remaining of his days in happiness and in peace. Let us now talk about the title, and then we will talk about finally the significance of the miracle in the title. So, you see, in a story full of several miraculous events, picking one particular over the others as the title demands, some analysis. The first miracle was the dog finding some gold for the good old couple. Second time, the dog, after his death, visited the old man and told him to make a mortar and mill, which again produced gold for them. Finally, the miracle in the title shows how the ashes brought life to dead plants. See, while the first two miracles, the previous two miracles are involved with gold and therefore with the materialistic world, the final miracle was truly of divine nature and not just limited to money. Because of its elevated nature and the fact that this was the miracle which also helped punish the wicked old couple for all their wrongdoings, it is appropriate as the title of the story. Let us now close this discussion with a final discussion on the significance of the miracle in the title. You see, the miracle that became the title of this Japanese tale is highly significant. Not only it is the first miracle that didn't involve gold or anything material, but also it symbolically represents the power of good-hearted kindness. The dog that came in the dreams was much loved by the old couple, like their own son. The burnt mortar and mill that provided the ashes were made from the pine tree beneath which the dog was laid in his eternal rest, and the grave was watered with the tears of pure love and loss, compassion. The ashes on their part brought dead, withered trees back to life and full bloom. The life that was taken away is the life that was returned in some other form, in some other place. But nothing really is lost. whatever goes comes around. This shows how love remains alive even in the bitter snows of jealousy and cruelty, and how kindness of soul, just like the sun's rays in the spring, make love bloom like a cherry tree even amid that wintry death. So here we end our discussion. Hope you have understood this story properly and loved it, this fairy tale. If you have any question, any doubt, feel free to leave a comment in the comment section. Till we meet again, bye bye.